Prafulla sir, I would request you to kindly start the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonam. And as editor, my responsibility to welcome you all. This is a very emotional moment for me and my team. And we were wondering how to celebrate 80 years. Then we thought, why not to have it with our extended family? And when we started thinking about everybody, the founding members, the contributors, the writers, the former editors, and one day when I was just planning about this, suddenly Kanchan rang up. And in his usual style, Prafulla, I want to, you take up something. There is First Amendment and 75 years are completing. And Organiser was the one that was responsible for the First Amendment of the Constitution. And I was just planning for this event. And I thought, it just struck that this is the best way, we can pay tribute to this entire legacy of 80 years, which actually stood for freedom of speech. Sometimes maybe A.R. Nair ji, Malkani ji, Advani ji, sometimes V.P. Bhatia or Balashankar ji, Chari ji, they are sitting here. Everybody, just they hand over the baton to somebody, but the spirit remained the same. And to celebrate that spirit, we are organizing this particular day. So, to begin with, Dada, with you, partition has been a very sensitive and a very close issue for you. Organiser was perhaps, besides Tribune and some media houses in Punjab, Organiser was keeping the spirit of, the issues related to the refugees, the plight of Hindus and Sikhs on East and West Pakistan. And on this background, first censorship was imposed on media. On the one hand, it was Organiser. On the other hand, it was Crossroads. And the debate started. And we all remember how Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar actually shaped that debate in the parliament, but outside. And remember, it was just a constituent assembly turned parliament. It was not even elected government. And still, the icon of liberalism in post-independent India, the so-called Nehruvian legacy, actually started its track record even before commencement of the constitution with censorship. So how do you see this beginning of debate on free speech in independent India?
Namaste. I must first begin with paying my very humble tribute to the Organiser as an institution, the team at Organiser which has kept the flag of the institution flying high, and to my friend and brother Prafulla, whom I keep on bothering as he just now mentioned. But what to do? I mean, nobody else is willing to take note of it. It was very famously said once that India and Indians have a very poor sense of history. Our sense of history is extremely poor, and that's why we tend to repeat all the bad things which have happened in the past, instead of learning and moving on. Now, coming back to what Prafulla mentioned, a very brief history. Organiser was formed to communicate between the RSS and its affiliates and the people, and in English, because they felt they needed to reach out to the top crest, which was the English-speaking crest, to remove misunderstandings and also to convey concerns of the non-English speaking classes of India. Now, this is where Organiser comes in from. It was launched just before partition, and then we know what happened during the partition, the horrific riots, the criminality which was visited on Hindus on both sides, in the west, in Punjab and other provinces, Sindh in the northwest frontier province, and in the east, in East Bengal. So the reportage in the Organiser was very focused. They actually sent out people to the various refugee camps to record their statements, to put out the horror stories. And the Delhi government at that time, whatever passed for the Delhi government, they imposed a pre-censorship order on Organiser. Now, there was no provision for censorship or leave alone pre-censorship in the law apart from the British law on censorship. Organiser's publisher at that time, Brij Bhushan, he contested that order in the Delhi High Court, in the Magistrates Court, and lost the case. And after that, the case goes to the Supreme Court. Organiser was represented by Nirmal Chandra Chatterjee, father of Somnath Chatterjee, the CPM leader. N.C. Chatterjee, of course, came from the Hindu Mahasabha. In the Supreme Court, Organiser wins the case, and the case comes to be known as Brij Bhushan versus Delhi. This greatly upset Nehru, who took it as a personal slight. And hence the First Amendment in 1950, the Constitution had not become operational. The first Parliament had yet to be elected. And even before all this happened, India saw the First Amendment to its Constitution putting curbs on free speech. There were other elements to the First Amendment, but the one which is of most relevance, and at least today the most relevant point, is the curb on free speech. There was free speech guaranteed in the original draft. 19.2 was brought in with various subclauses to restrict speech. Now, just as an aside, the world's oldest democracy, or so they claim, which is America, their First Amendment was to institutionalize free speech, that, free speech is non-negotiable. And you can take a position that it is free speech and therefore I cannot be punished or prosecuted. The world's largest democracy, India, the First Amendment is to do with curtailing speech, imposing curbs on free speech. So this is just to make a contrast. A last point which I would like to make, one of the biggest contributions which Organiser made to the world of journalism was Shri K.R. Malkani. He was a polyglot. I mean, he could speak various languages. He was interested in various things. And he was the editor who brought the paper into prominence. And he had a deputy, a very loyal deputy. And that was Shri L.K. Advani. And L.K. Advani was the film critic of on the Organiser. So it gave him 30 rupees per month and also a free ticket to watch all the films that he wanted to watch.
So, Dada, there are very, interesting when we go through those, archives. Of course, the first edition was edited by Mr. A.R. Nair, and he declared the independence with the first edition on 3rd of July, or rather, it was on 16th of August, 1947 as Tejomay Hindu Rashtra. It's a wonderful editorial that is written. And there is immense clarity about who we are as a nation. We are making a new state. India is embarking as an independent state. As far as Rashtra is concerned, we are ancient and we should celebrate it. That is the clear message that Organiser is trying to give. But at the same time, the pain of partition, that is continuously there in this first phase. And there this, interesting questions that Malkani ji asked in every edition, 6 questions he used to put. And in between, after this session, if possible, I would request the kind of cartoons that he has used to describe the situation of Hindus, the policy of Nehru government as far as the refugees from East and West Pakistan are concerned, and what Kanchan was mentioning about the reasonable restrictions. The reasonable restriction idea was expanded, and one interesting clause, of course, one can understand about the decency and morality and social conduct. One can understand, if you are harming somebody else. The interesting clause that he inserted, and I would like to come to KG on this because the entire CA debate actually is rooted in that particular issue. The government inserted one important section as far as reasonable restriction is concerned, that is friendly relationship with neighboring countries. And he wanted actually to create a ground for Nehru-Liaquat Pact, which was giving assurance for minority protection on each side. And it actually created. Now, KG, when we are seeing this entire discourse on CA and the Muslims in India would lose the citizenship, and the freedom of media has been curbed in last 10-15 years, and you are not allowed to speak when you can speak against anybody whatever you want to without any substance. So how do you see this journey? You have seen a lot of many governments with very close quarters. In 1990s, you have seen it very closely. With agencies, you have seen it closely. So how do you see this debate? Has the contours changed, or the sides have changed? What has happened?
Thank you so much, Prafull. Let me at the outset congratulate you and the team at Organiser for the 80th anniversary celebrations. It has been a remarkable journey. I often say that when you hear the word Organiser, the first thing that comes to your mind is nationalism. Organiser has become synonymous with nationalism. No other, sorry to say, no other publication comes to your mind. And I have been a regular writer for Organiser for a long time. And I can only say that apart from all the, the important critical roles that Organiser has played since its inception, one of the most important roles have been decolonizing the Indian mind. The Bharat Bodh that we are talking about. And I'm really glad to say that wherever I worked, whether at IIMC, at MCU, at India Habitat, I ensured that Organiser is available and accessible to our readers, our students, our teachers. Because I believe that, anybody, even those who necessarily do not subscribe to a certain point of view, may have differences. But if they want an objective voice, then they should read the Organiser. Coming to your question, Prafull, I believe that, you at Organiser have also been countering a lot of narratives. Not just grooming a nationalist mindset over the last few decades, but also countering anti-India, anti-Hindu narratives. For example, perhaps today what you see the new JNU, we have seen the old one. Those who have seen the new JNU should give credit to Organiser for bringing about that change. If the JNU dossiers were not published, the anti-national activities which were happening within the premises of JNU would never have seen the light of the day, and for decades they would have continued with their evil designs.
KG is trying to say a former student of JNU has done that.
So, because he knows the JNU very well, too well. So, that is something. So, this is a journey which hasn't completed. It is on a mission mode. And I have not seen organizers sparing anybody, And as somebody who has been a regular reader also of Organiser, I can say that whenever any voice, any power has sought to suppress the voice of dissent, the Organiser has taken up those issues. We would always mention, whenever we talk about the infamous emergency, we would talk about Ramnath Goenka and Indian Express. But I think that we need to enlighten, now that we are in our 80th year, the younger generation about the role played by Organiser and the nationalist press at that time, the underground leaflets, the pamphlets that were circulated across the country. We as youngsters had seen that. So, what was that role needs to be incorporated, if not in history textbooks, any student studying media should know about it. That's what I believe in. I also feel that, how that particular, provision that has fueled this. You see, I also believe certainly that freedom does not mean license.
Absolutely.
Freedom of speech is not license to express anything, undoubtedly. But then, is it subject to national interest or government interest? That is the big question. What is it subservient to? I think that it is important that we understand this basic difference. Because if a provision has been included only to placate or to facilitate an agreement, as has been pointed out here, it is something that we need to ponder over. And perhaps it is time for us to think about abrogating that aspect also. Because it is not the government to decide, what view the media is going to have with regard to a neighboring country. For example, I always cite this example, that there was a media house when the Kulbhushan Jadhav case was happening. That media house, it was a website, it is still there. It actually published a story saying that he was a raw agent. And at the International Court of Justice, the Pakistani lawyer was flashing that particular story and saying that this is not what I am saying or my country is saying, this is what the Indian media is saying. I mean,
Indian media run from somewhere else.
yes.
Funded by US.
Now, doesn't that come under this particular clause? But no action was taken under that clause. So, what is important is that because it is helping the powers that be in building that narrative. So, I think it is very important that today Organiser has taken up this debate, and I hope that this debate is carried forward, not just by Organiser, but in university campuses, academic campuses, and I see many academician friends here, whether it is in the law faculty or in the media faculty. I think it's important that this is widely debated, and we certainly take this up, that what for certain provisions were introduced, and not to talk about the 1975 censorship, which, over 10,000 journalists were put behind the bars, and the kind of actions that were taken, that is history and I think part of the popular folklore now. But these are certain aspects of suppression, some of the initial Supreme Court rulings right from 1950s, which are very important, but which have never been told. And I hope that Organizer can run a series of stories, by people like Kanchan, who can actually throw more light on this aspect.
So many youngsters who know that 1975, this black first page and besides masthead, everything was in black, that is famously known. But Malkani ji used a different method. He used to submit his entire editorial, entire content to the censor commissioner. Censor commissioner used to cut it. Malkani ji used to put a Caesar on it and writing on it, censor Caesar. That was Malkani ji. And he kept those editorial as it is, the stories as it is, and on blank pages, he used to just place it, censor Caesar. That's all. I think that was more powerful message. But Kanchanda, what KG said, about this, it's a very thin line about the government interest or a national interest. And because you have seen in Bengal, where a cartoon against a chief minister also can put somebody in jail. And still, unfortunately, on real issues, freedom of speech could never become a real debating point in media. So how should we draw this thin line about, what is there in the free speech domain? Because reasonable restrictions are there, and there has to be certain standards as far as reasonable restrictions are concerned. But where are those, lines drawn?
This is a very long-drawn debate, long going-on debate that is criticizing the government, also criticizing the country. In an electoral democracy, the government represents the country. So, to question the government is perfectly legitimate. But when you attribute things to the government which are not based on facts, on data, then what you are also doing is that you are attributing those things on the country. So it's a thin red line, but professional journalists would know what, or professional writers would know what is anti-government and what is anti-nation. I am not really worried about that now, but my point is very simple. For instance, we have laws on obscenity. We have laws on public order. So you do not need to impose restrictions on free speech to ensure either public order or to control or not have obscenity in the public domain. Because the other laws would kick in automatically. You see, Nehru's purpose was, I'm sorry to say this, people keep on saying you are obsessed with Nehru, you are obsessed with Nehru. My family never voted Congress because we are obsessed with Nehru. Nehru hated Bengalis. He thought Bengalis are dark-skinned. Therefore, they are subhuman, and it was a racist attitude. I can speak to you for hours on that. Nehru's purpose was different. You mentioned relations with neighboring countries. His concern was, okay, the Liaquat Pact was there, but on China, around March, April 1950, we establish relations with China. And immediately Nehru starts working on promoting China on the global stage. Even before any other country had recognized the then regime over there, including pushing China's envelope in the UN. And the then leftists who were aligned with Moscow, and Moscow was not yet aligned with Beijing, they had questioned this motive of his. And why was he trying to do this? And Nehru again felt unnerved because there was opposition from the right in the Congress. Congress, as we know, was a big umbrella party, and there were people on the right over there. And this part of the First Amendment has never been fully explored, because therein lies the root of our problems with China. Because what were we promising them then? Was it reiterated by the undisclosed agreement between Congress and the CPC? We just don't know. Now, the other last point which I wanted to make, everybody is, Organizer, of course, played a sterling role. And then poor Mr. Malkani was picked up and put in jail, where, of course, the first thing which he did was he made friends of the Shahi Imam. And he said that I used to pull his leg and I used to make him look silly, and he would just keep on pleading with me, अरे जनाब आपको इस्लाम के बारे में मुझसे ज़्यादा पता है, but don't make me look so bad all the time. But the other paper which played a very big role in framing the political debate preceding 1975 was Motherland, and of which Malkani ji was the editor. And some of the finest journalists who came to dominate Indian journalism after emergency, say between 1977 and mid-1980s, were all from Malkani ji's Motherland stable. Whether it was Virender Kapoor, whether it was Kumi Kapoor, all of them, you name them, they had a Motherland connection. They were trained by him. They were from Motherland. And today we talk about the need to look for nationalism. At that time, if you felt that you were a nationalist, that you identified yourself with the Indian nation, then you automatically went and signed up with either the Organizer or the Motherland as a fresh graduate out of college or university. So that was the kind of identification which existed. It's one of the saddest things that that Motherland never surfaced again after the emergency. I wish it had survived, because it was something that people still remember. People my generation or slightly older than me, we still remember that paper. And lastly, what I would also mention is that we have to accept court orders whether we like them or not. So if the court says that no, cannot be done, this cannot be written, you have to accept it. But what Malkani ji did, and what you said just now, is how to go around the court order and yet make your point, and make it in a much more powerful manner than the court or your adversary did. So these are all lessons which we need to remember. And Prafulla, you should also, try to take this down to youngsters who are from our fold. I know it sounds very bad to say our fold, their fold, your fold. But what I meant is people who are enthusiastic about the nation, about their own identity, people who are confused about their identity. For instance, this first editorial which you mentioned, I think it should be reprinted 1,000,000 times, and it should be circulated in schools, in junior schools, so that children learn. Answer this simple question, who are we? Quickly, if you allow me another 10 seconds, as they say in TV debates, Vidya Naipal was here in 2004 to release the Hindi editions of his two books, Among the Believers and the other one. And I think they were published by Bharat Prakashan, if I'm not mistaken, or I'm forgetting. So there was a release ceremony where he was present. And in his opening remarks, he says, all my life, I have spent an entire lifetime trying to answer the question, who am I? I was born in Trinidad. I am of Indian origin. I am culturally, civilizationally, I am Indian. Yet I am not an Indian, so who am I? And I find, he says, Naipal says, I find that every Indian I meet is struggling with to answer the same question, who am I? And this needs to be answered, and it's not only in India, in America also, Americans are still struggling to understand who are they, and therefore Huntington's book, the two books on identity, Clash of Civilizations, and again I think the second book is called Who Am I? Who are we? Who are we? So this is something which I think we should take seriously. And one of the key takeaways from 75 years of the First Amendment, 50 years of the emergency, and 80 years of the organizer, because they're all interlinked, should be this answering this question with credibility as to who are we.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that clarity, Kanchanda. KG, Kanchanda spoke about 1950s First Amendment, emergency. But after emergency, many things change. Not just in media, but the way governments function, the pillars of, the state machinery, they approached each other. Even the judiciary that used to stand for protection of fundamental rights in the pre-emergency period, that also changed, the primacy of directive principles. Socialism still remained, and suddenly then we see opening up of not just the market, but the media, the mind space. And you have seen that era of globalization very, very closely, the way media. Now in this market-driven media, because, after independence, there was this zeal about independence, reconstructing nation. And so there were many people who in media were actually talking about these debates. In fact, that time when I see Motherland, Kanchanda is talking about, in fact, in 1974, December precisely, Malkani ji's first time warned about similar kind of scenario, emergencies coming, because of which he was actually picked up. Even before emergency was declared somewhere in March, and he was questioned by IB then. But after this 1990s, the way electronic media has come up, the way breaking news culture has come up, anybody is breaking anything in the name of news. So how are we going to deal with this entire delicate debate of freedom of speech on the one hand, and still democratic and constitutional responsibilities on the other hand?
Thank you. There have been two factors which have redefined, reshaped the Indian media scenario. Post what you said, the liberalization, privatization, globalization, the LPG as we call it. One is changes in the ownership patterns. Please remember that we are also celebrating 200 years of the first
Indian
Hindi
journals.
newspaper in India, the Udanta Martand by Pandit uh, Shukla, Jugal Kishore Shukla, in Calcutta in 1826. And this year we are celebrating the 200 years. His motto or credo of the newspaper was Hindustaniyon ke hit het. Whether it was Baba Saheb Ambedkar or whether it was, Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and hundreds of such people. You had Pandit Makhanlal Chaturvedi with his Karamveer. They all were on a mission mode in the sense that they were individually running the newspaper with a mission. Whether it was the liberation of the country or for Baba Saheb it was, the liberation, the social liberation of, Dalits through Mook Nayak and Prabuddha Bharat. But then came the corporatization part, where you rightly said the editorial has been marginalized, or the role of editor. Today, many of the educated people do not know who the editor of, say, the leading papers are. They do not know. And very famously, a very famous newspaper baron had famously said that for me, selling a newspaper is like selling soap. I don't see any difference between that. For them, it is business, pure business. Then came an era where industrial houses created media houses as a cover-up for their misdeeds. And some created media houses to advance their business interests. This was the kind of corporatization that happened, wherein profit rather than national interest or social change, this became the priority. The second major change was technological revolution, wherein we saw radical changes. There has been a democratization and decentralization of content. Concepts like citizen journalism. The people themselves were able to reach out to thousands and lakhs of people, which a small and medium newspaper on its own cannot reach. So, there has been this paradigm shift of both ownership and technology. Now, to navigate this has become pretty complex now, because we are dealing with a flat universe, where, and our own leadership also has taken on to social media in a big way to reach out to the people rather than, approach the so-called traditional media. When we used to study media, at that time traditional media meant puppetry and folk theatre. But today traditional media means the newspaper and television. Nobody talks about them as the modern media. This has been the big change. Now what has happened is that in this scenario, it has gone into the hands of the people. And please remember, we may have this perception that it is in the hands of the common man, but it is not in the hands of the common man. The entire algorithmic thing is controlled by powers outside of the country. Their servers are based out of the country. There has been initiatives like Coup, Zoho, and all these initiatives, but so far not in the manner, and here I must say that one may have very serious differences with their entire system, but the fact that China has developed its own, whether it is GPS or its own Facebook, its own equivalent of the same, somehow with all the software professionals around the world, from Silicon Valley to Bangalore, we have not been able to develop our own servers, our own, in the way some of the countries have been able to. So what is happening is, we talk about data sovereignty. A lot of this data is today our own data, our personal data, our national data. Everything is stored abroad. Even today you would be surprised to know that many government officers and government offices still prefer the Gmail rather than the nic.in. So that kind of dependency has been created. Now in this scenario, how much and how do we do it? How do we regulate this whole thing? Control certainly is a no after emergency. But regulation, and how do we regulate it? There have been the IT Act and all that. Eminent lawyers are here, they will be able to explain it further. But at the end of the day, can you control it? That becomes the big question. And here comes two important aspects to my, to how to deal with it. That was your question. One is certainly regulation has to be there. And secondly, there has to be awareness. You call it media literacy, you call it digital literacy, from whatever name you call it. People have to be made aware, because right from a 5-year-old child to a 95-year-old, senior citizen, they are all consuming media like anything. There is infodemic, an overdose of information where we are unable to distinguish between right and wrong information. False narratives are being peddled from across the borders. We saw it, this crisis is real. We saw it during the farmers' protests, how proxy handles were peddling a separatist narrative. Perhaps one of the factors that for the first time the government decided to withdraw rather than pursue with it, because a separatist narrative was sought to be created. Now in this scenario, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So whether it is right from the school curriculum to universities to professional organizations, there has to be a massive media literacy campaign, including incorporating it in the school curriculum. People have to be made aware of media is no more an isolated thing. Media is an integral part of our lives. It has come into our drawing rooms, it has come into our bedrooms, so we need to be aware of it. Second, as I said, regulation. And the third is that we need to have our own international platforms. Russia has Russia Today. China has China Central TV. France has France Today. Americans have the CNN. You name it. I think that despite the fact that we have made attempts like DD India and stuff like that, we are still looking at the world through the Western prism and not the Indian prism. We are not able to provide to the world the Indian perspective. Imagine, just weeks back, our television channels, you mentioned about television channels, they were referring to West Asia as Middle East. It is not Middle East for us. Even today, the protests in Gilgit-Baltistan, Muzaffarabad and the northern areas are put in the foreign pages of the newspaper, whereas the Indian Parliament unanimously, not once but thrice, has declared the entire Jammu and Kashmir as an integral part of India. Yet we report that in the foreign pages. Why? I think that we need to create this kind of an international platforms which should be able to not just cater to the Indian diaspora, but also we have, when we are looking at Viksit Bharat 2047, when we are looking at a superpower India, it is very important that the Indian narrative is the way through an Indian perspective has to be shared with the global audience. We need to work in that direction.
Thank you, KG. I'm sure this debate can go on, and this is a very, very delicate, because if I ask Kanchanda, whether 61 eminent people should write a letter to India and Pakistan prime ministers, suddenly he would say they should be, kicked out, and suddenly his, free speech stand would change. And this can happen with anybody. I'm not talking just about Kanchanda. This can happen with anybody of us. When it is this free speech is a very, very convenient tool. When it comes to not just the countries, when it comes to India, Pakistan, when it comes to religion, when it comes to caste, when it comes to language. But what I personally feel, that if there is a clarity and consensus, as I started by saying, that who we are as a nation, as a journalist, facts are sacrosanct. But there will be always personal views. Objective news is a facade. Organiser chose ideological journalism out of conviction, not out of compulsion. Anybody can have ideological position and stand by it. The question is, when you take a so-called independent, non-partisan media platforms or journalists, and then you choose to, be on one side. And I'll not name the media, it's not appropriate for me, but a very, very senior journalist going in the Communist Party's party congress, inaugurating the, their exhibition, and still that platform is called a very independent platform. While Organiser, accidentally, Kanchan started by saying our and yours. Actually, Organiser Chariji would speak about this during emergency or even immediately after emergency, when there were not many platforms available. Many opposition leaders actually found Organiser as a convenient platform. We, all of us, tried to give space to all kinds of voices. They are afraid to write for Organiser. I know, again, I'll not name, but very, very senior leader, one from Congress party and one from Communist party, after writing an article, withdrew it saying that, I know you will not make any change, you will not change my basic argument, but my party will question me, so please don't publish. So Organiser never called it a, RSS mouthpiece. RSS never called it, this is our mouthpiece. I enjoy complete editorial freedom. My managing director is sitting here, and RSS General Secretary will come next. But I can assure you, I enjoyed my editorial freedom the best possible way in last 12, 13 years. Nobody ever questioned me why you are taking up this issue. And still people label me as a, mouthpiece of somebody. But that is the irony, that is the way we have to deal with it. Somebody else called us mouthpiece. And we are dealing with this. They have freedom of speech. But I have given a couple of notices on this. We don't, yes, we have ideological position and we stand by it. We are not ashamed of it. But why you are, people who are not even responsible for my editorial take have been questioned on the issues that I have picked up. That is the only thing. But this is a very fascinating debate, and I'm sure in coming days I'll continue this with both Kanchan and KG. But I'll stop here because we have very, very short window for this entire thing. Both the editors are my predecessors are here. They are going to speak about their experiences with Organiser. Then family members of former editors are here. From Mr. A.R. Nayar's family, Malkani ji's entire family is there. Pratibha Advani ji would be coming. So she is already here. We have to felicitate them. We have to, and then Vice President would also, Honorable Vice President would be coming at 5:50. So before that, I want to have a chance to listen to the former editors and the family members. So I would stop this session here. Thank you, Kanchan, and we will continue this conversation. Thank you, KG. It's always a pleasure. Over to you, Son.